All right, it's Thursday, it's 5 p.m., so it's time for End Hype Live. Thanks for joining in. We go live every Thursday at 5, and I bring on a friend, I bring on an expert to answer your questions that will help you get to that next level with your business, with your product launch, with your marketing, with your manufacturing. Whatever question that you have, send it to me, and I'll bring on a friend. I'll bring on somebody that can do that for you, that can help you overcome that obstacle. And we have a really great guest today. Uh, we're going to talk to my friend Nate Pio. So I keep hearing all these things about LinkedIn, and Nate helps to build personal brands that give corporate brands personality. I love that. I love that. But if you haven't seen him on LinkedIn, he puts out a ton of content there, and I like from the message to the branding to the emoticon that you have in your name. Like you're really all over this LinkedIn strategy, and I can't wait to get into that and talk about just talk about networking and everything that you do to reach out and it if I could get like your origin story or the overview, who are you and how did you get here?
Yeah, I love. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Always loved coming on with guests or being a guest for once on a podcast, and also helping you and your audience get their questions answered, whether it's regarding LinkedIn or whether it's some other aspect I can help. So, um, like you said, like I've been pretty active on LinkedIn, but that wasn't always the case. And kind of right before we jumped on the call, I was telling you my story about starting my podcast a year ago, and I was actually writing in a journal about like, hey, what am I going to write about to start a podcast on? Like, how am I going to do it? And I was scared to put myself out there. And the reason why I was actually even considering starting a podcast in December of 2019 was I had been somebody going through my career that just avoided networking. Like I didn't see the real purpose of it. I sat on this, I was a buyer. I worked for a home builder. I worked for various home builders, but I was always the person that people were approaching to sell me products. So I was like, like if I go to something, somebody's going to want me to buy something. I don't want to have to talk to them and tell them no. So I was avoiding it. And this is like really early in my career. But as I progressed through my career, it became apparent I needed to start networking and building relationships because to me, part of your job is not what you physically can do yourself. It's what you can get a team of other people assembled, bought into what you're doing to accomplish it, right? Whether you're building a physical product or you've got like a game plan or you got like a big idea that you're trying to do, like you can't do this stuff on your own. So I started building a network of people within my industry very unintentionally. Like it was just kind of like random. It was going to like the mixers. It was hanging out with a few people at lunch, and it was really it was really limited to people like I would consider like my bar buddies, like people I would go get a beer with. If I like didn't feel like I was comfortable enough to go get a beer with them, I didn't like actually try to go connect with people. But I did progress in my career, and I got to a point where my employer wanted me to have answers to questions that I didn't have good enough relationships with the people to go get those answers. And I was like, I just can't call up somebody I kind of know and say like, hey, give me the keys to the castle. Like I needed to, build relationships. So I started reaching out to people outside of this like limited circle and making relationships there. They're still local to my industry and still like at a pretty regional experience. But after doing that for a period of time, like all of a sudden I was able to solve more problems at my job. And it wasn't that I could solve them, is I had more resources to solve them. And so I said, that's kind of interesting. What if I expanded it from my regional network to like this national network? Because we had like localized subcontractors, and then we had national product manufacturers, faucets, flooring, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So again, go through the process of not knowing anybody in that space to building a network, and few years later, all of a sudden that's grown. And again, I'm able to improve my value in the services I provided to my employer. I was like, this is kind of interesting. And I've also got this interest in startup businesses. I love helping people kick off their idea, turn into a business, figure out a game plan, put strategies together, like talking like ideas to really grow. So I was like, I would like to start advising startup businesses with the intention, like I really was like looking for like, hey, if I wanted to invest in the next Facebook company, like they're not going to show up at my door, knock on the door. Like I need to go hang out where those people are going to be, build relationships so that if that opportunity was there, I'd be in the right place. So I started like networking with people in this startup space just simply because I just didn't know a good company from a bad company. And how do you get knowledge? You start inserting yourself into the people that are experts. So that kind of triggered
That's
into
how
this.
we first connected back in April, right? I'm always trying to talk to, different people like in startup coaching or in incubation, acceleration, venture capital, and we kind of connected online, it's interesting because
Yeah.
I don't think there's any business avenue where it's more apparent the power of network than in helping startups or trying to start your own, your own big thing. It's like, how do you go from 0 to 100 as fast as possible? And if you have a great network, even just like mentors or experienced people to ask questions to, it really streamlines that whole process. So,
Well, I'll give you like a really specific example around that. So as I got started in helping some startup companies, it was very random. So I was like, how do I get plugged in? I'll find some incubators, go down to these incubators, and they're like, oh, go to these pitch contests. So I started going to the pitch contests. I started meeting people that were helping others, and I told them, hey, I want to get involved advising people, and I took a bunch of meetings, and they all happened to be in this clean tech space, which I knew nothing really about. And I was personally like going, what does me with a construction background know about tech? Like, how can I advise a tech company? I don't know how to code. I don't know how to program. I don't know complex things. Like, I guess I'll figure it out as we go. So one of the companies I started working with had a product, or they still have this product. It's really cool, actually. It's a smart water meter that uses artificial intelligence to detect water leaks, and it also tracks, flow of the water through it. So for a property owner, it's really, really a cool product because it's measuring your water, so you can bill your residents their water usage accurately. And if you have a leak, it shuts the valve, shuts the water off, so you don't have a water intrusion, which is really, really, if you own a lot of apartments or a lot of rental properties, you'll find out very quickly the odds of you having a major water intrusion damage are about 100%, and it's going to be like $50,000 worth of damages and insurance and all this. Like, it's just a mess. So I was like, hey, that's really, really powerful. How can I help them out? And you start like talking to them about what their problems are, how you can support them, what they need to do to take it to the next level. And I found out like they had a little bit of their sales strategy a little off. It was aligned more of like a business to consumer model. And we talked about it being, hey, this would really work good in a business to business model. And oh, by the way, the business to business model doesn't work the same way as business to consumer model, but like you need to have it flow. Like I started realizing like, hey, the way your product is going to be sold to the market is very similar to a lot of the products I buy, and they kind of go through the same distribution channels. And guess what? They also have a lot of the same product reps. So like if you're selling stuff in the construction world, you might hire what we call rep agencies, which are people that go out and represent your product and other like-minded products. So if you're selling toilets, they might want to sell this water meter at the same time, because if you're talking to somebody about toilets, yeah, you got toilets to buy, you want to buy my toilets. Oh, by the way, we also have this other product. So they're very compatible products. So all of a sudden I'm making these introductions like, hey, I can help you get introduced to these people here, these people here, these people here. And then I'm like, oh, and by the way, I also know some people that help write building code. And this, in California, which is where I live, building code is like always adapting, and it's always progressing towards more sustainability, clean energy, Cal Green, all this stuff. So water consumption is huge in California. So like, I'm like, oh, I know some people that you could be introduced to that could introduce you to other people that are kind of like in this space of figuring out what the code's going to be. And so like all of a sudden my network that I didn't really realize I was building was actually very beneficial to this startup company, and it starts opening up a lot of doors to people. And so going back to like a little bit of my origin story. So as I was starting to do this, I had this epiphany, and the epiphany was I've felt called to do something bigger, to play in a bigger space than I had in the past. I'd always felt like, hey, there's some calling that I'm supposed to do, but I'm not sure what it is. But I did know that every time I went down that path to find that calling, there came a point where my self-doubt got in the way. It was like, hey, I'm not comfortable sharing this part of me. You know, like anybody that's doing something really big, they come to a point in their life where they have to put themselves out there to basically get people to buy in on their idea and their movement and all this other stuff. So like,
100%.
I need to get past like my limiting beliefs of sharing my voice, my worth, whatever it is with the world. Like those are stories that tell myself that nobody cares or I'm not good enough, and I just got to get past it. So that was my idea of like, I'm going to do anything that felt hard and felt uncomfortable. I was going to do it anyways for a period of time. And the reason why I was like that way was I wanted to make sure if I decided I didn't like something and I didn't want to do it, that's okay. But I needed to do it long enough did I decide to not do it because I didn't like it, or did I decide to not do it because I was scared? So that led to podcasting. The podcast was another avenue to do something uncomfortable, but it was also a way to get doors open for me that might not have been opened otherwise. Like, you know, if you have a podcast, you can call up somebody and say, I have a podcast, you want to come on it? There's a conversation that can be had. And so it's like a reason to connect with people. So that's what I started doing. And then I started connecting more with people on LinkedIn, started being more active on social media, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward a bunch of months, and I find myself without employment. And I'm like, hey, what's my next move? And I had been growing my network on LinkedIn and growing it in person. And it's not just straight up like going and collecting connections, but like really taking somebody you meet virtually and getting them into a personal conversation. So like clearly, like we're doing a lot more virtual calls. It's not the same as meeting somebody in person, but it's not just like, hey, I like somebody's Instagram post. We're kind of like Instagram chums, but we've actually had phone calls. We've actually discussed things. We've talked about supporting each other. And I built this network of people, very intentionally trying to grow it and get my word out, and also support as many people as I possibly could along the way. So then when I found myself without employment, I was debating, do I go into another job hunt and do what I've been doing, or do I go down this entrepreneurial journey? And I said, you know what? I'm going to do that entrepreneurial journey, because if I don't do it now, I'm going to wish I had in 3 years. And if I wish I had in 3 years, then might as well just do it now. So I just started going into it, and I didn't know really what I was doing, what I was going to talk about, or what my business was going to be. I thought I was going to consult like sales training and kind of like this consulting for this purchasing role. But the more and more people I talked to were like, hey, how can you help me with LinkedIn? How can you help me with LinkedIn? And I was like, well, here's the thing. Like, I love networking. I love connecting with people. LinkedIn is just a tool that allows you to do it at scale and do it, you know, everybody's kind of there. So think of that as like an online networking event that's happening 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And you can go find the people that you need to get connected to, build relationships with. So I just started kind of leaning into that as I got asked more and more, like, hey, can you help us grow a brand on LinkedIn? And a lot of times what people don't realize with LinkedIn and building brands on LinkedIn is it's not like Instagram where you run a bunch of ads against it and people are going to engage with your posts and like your product because it's visual. It's a very relationship oriented platform where you need to connect people to people. And so that's why I say it's a personal brand, because what makes us relatable is who we are, business wise, professional wise, what our experiences are, the challenges we go through, the struggle. So like, you know, we connected on an entrepreneurship relationship, and we're helping startups. Like we know that about each other, but we were also connected to another similar networking group where we, you know, follow influencers or that relate to our mission and message. So like all these things kind of like help you build these bonds to take things to the next level. So I show people now, I was like, hey, you want to get on LinkedIn, you want to get leads, you want to grow your business, you want to get a job, build a personal brand to showcase who you are, your expertise, and why people want to trust you to do business with you. And that personal brand actually turns into a brand personality for your corporation, because nobody's going to interact with your logo or your your generic website or marketing materials, but they are going to interact with you as a person, whether you're the face of the business as the CEO or you're working for a larger corporation and you're a sales team. Like, you have to have yourself out there.
I love that. There's a lot there that I want to kind of unpack really quickly, because there's I talk to people a lot about giving yourself permission to do difficult things poorly at first, or in the nicest way, just giving yourself permission to suck, right? Because especially really smart and talented people that have experienced high levels of success, whether through school or through business, when they move into another domain, they're like, I must be doing this wrong because it's hard, and they're so used to winning. I'm like, hey, I understand, but you got to give yourself a little bit of permission to, like, be a novice again, be a neophyte, and then like gain mastery. So is it that it's difficult, or you're bad at it, or is it that you're impatient, or this is not the right thing? So like, but we have a little phrase that I use a lot called, we just say, action creates opportunity, right? So you do something, and if you start putting out content like that, and you're like, hey, I'm going to put out some content that's going to give me an excuse to connect with some people. Maybe you don't know the exact reason why, but you kind of know your personal goal of what you're trying to achieve. But it seems like stuff just starts happening, or it's a confluence of opportunities start occurring, and then maybe something happens in your life, and you're like you said, hey, I have these other opportunities now because I'm in the slipstream of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really cool.
I love that you talk about taking action to create these opportunities, and that when I was talking about doing all those things, it was like, hey, I'm going to go on this journey, and I don't know where it's going to go. But I do know, I did know a few things. One, we tend to underestimate what we can do in 5 years, right? Like we always do that. And two, whatever we think the end result might be, typically is way different. Like it evolves. It's never the same. It's not even, sometimes it's not even close to where you're at. So I was like, here's the thing. If I just go moving in this direction with this intention of meeting as many people as I can in 5 years, raise my expectations, what I can do in 5 years, then I'm going to be blown away at the end of 5 years. And along the way, people are going to come into my life. If I'm not sitting at home, but I'm sitting at home because we're in COVID. But if I'm out there getting to know people and trying to connect with people, the right people start coming into your life. So here's an example. If I want to get really, really good at golf, and I've never golfed in my life before, like, I don't know where to get started. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it, but I do know I'll probably get better at golf if I go to the golf course than if I go to the coffee shop, right? Very likely. I mean, I could go down the coffee shop, Tiger Woods could be there. That happened to be that day, and he might take me under my wing. It's possible, but the odds of that happening are very slim compared to finding people that are going to put me in the right direction going to the golf course. So all I know is go in the direction where you think the answers are going to lie. And if you show up enough times, people are going to appear into your life. They're going to help you along the journey. They're going to open doors for you to meet other people. And those answers are going to start evolving to yourself. And so you go, you talk about like, well, I don't know anything. I'm not good. I'm a novice. Like, why would I go hang out these places? You do have to, kind of drop the ego and say, hey, I'm willing to learn as I go, but I'm also trusting the process, faith in the mission, whatever it might be, whatever you want to call it, that the right answers are going to come into your life when they need to. And for whatever reason, they always do. And if you don't, it's usually because you've chosen to not continue down that path. That's been my personal experience.
Yeah. And for me, it seems like doing something, I years ago wanted to get involved in startups, and I wanted to like know how all these things worked and know what the acronyms mean, and how do people go get funding, how do people do all these like all the things that you read in newspapers and magazines and online. And I'm like, I have no idea how any of that works. I've worked with some companies that have gotten acquired, but like, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, I have this specific skill set in product development and manufacturing, so I'm going to go offer that to people. And then instead, like, I could sit at home and I could try to read every book about startup acquisitions and how everything works and become really smart and confident, and then go in there and be like, I know things, and probably be wrong. Or I could just say, hey, this is what I know right now, and I'm willing to learn and kind of get into the mix. I think you learn faster just by just getting in there and doing stuff, because then you end up having conversations with, instead of a book mentor, with like a real mentor or somebody that's actually doing it, or I say sitting shotgun with somebody and like actually experiencing the life of it versus like the case study of it.
Yeah,
And
you definitely learn faster by doing, and the other cool thing about startups is I think your resources are limited,
mhm.
and you're going to be challenged to solve problems that you wouldn't have. If you work for a huge company, you're like, I don't understand the marketing aspect of it. That's marketing's problem. I don't have to care about it. Like, if you're an
Yeah,
entrepreneur and you're a startup and you're like, hey, I really know how to make this really cool product. You're like, okay, well, how are you going to sell it? Well, I've never done that before. Well, you're going to be selling it. And guess what? Not just selling it to your customers. You need to go sell it to your investors, or you got to go sell it to the bank to get a loan, or you got to go sell it to your vendors are going to take a chance to come work with you. Like, you're in sales no matter what. But you're also learning along the ways to be resourceful, because you go, I can't do everything myself. I don't have the money, big budgets to acquire the team to do it. So you start looking for other solutions. And I think
oh yeah.
what they say, necessity creates innovation or something like that. But that tends to happen. And I used to, okay, so when I first got started in my career, I worked for this construction company. We built water treatment plants. And there is a saying, I don't know, I won't cuss on your show, but F up, move up. And the thing was, between it, like, the people that kind of like had bad projects that lost money, or they had major problems on their job, they tended to get promoted and rise to the company faster.
Yeah.
And the reason was because if you were on a good job and everything went smooth sailing, like, you didn't see where the holes in your boat were, right? You
Sure.
just, it's like, hey, we did good, so it must have been something I did. But when a project went bad and you learned, like, you were losing money and you had to be like always thinking of new ways to solve problems, or you learned, like, okay, why did that go bad? Because we didn't do XYZ up front. So on the next project, you're like, we're doing XYZ, and all of a sudden that job went really smooth. So if you're on the job and it was going smooth, it was usually because somebody had experienced a lot of the bad stuff before and knew how to avoid it getting started. And so, like, you just didn't become aware of it. It's like, hey, it's safe. We all know what we're doing. In reality, you kind of got there because of somebody else's experience.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's definitely. I talked with my friend Dan a couple weeks ago, and he is an engineer. He works at startups, and I said that, yeah, that's one of my favorite things. Is I grew up in a small business, not quite a startup, but it's the same kind of thing as like, hey, who wants to do this? And everybody kind of steps back, and you're like, I guess I'm the person that has to do this. So you end up figuring it out. And then, like, working with startups, it's, yeah, there's 3 people on the team. There should be 30 people on the team. So you get to do things. And the nicest way I could put it is like, you get to do things that there's no logical business reason why you should be allowed to do them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, who knows how Instagram works? It's like, I've used Instagram before, and like, you're in charge of marketing, and and then you do that a couple times, and you're like, I guess I know how to market things. I've sold millions of dollars worth of stuff through. I know how this works, but it's interesting to see things from the other direction, where it's like I was saying, sit down and try to formally learn and create in a vacuum. And I kind of come from a wing it background, and I've seen both ends because I work with big corporations primarily in my day job, and you see kind of like why like Boeing has so many processes that things move really slowly, but eventually it's going to work. And you have all these meetings and conversations, and sometimes I'm like mystified that planes fly, but I know that there's layers of process to make things happen, to be safe and to double and triple check. But then you get whiplash because I also work with entrepreneurs, and they're like, yeah, we're going to make a drone. It's like, okay, but you don't have a background in any type of aerospace, and they're like, no problem, man, we're doing it. And so you see these two ends of the spectrum, and like, I mean, I'll be damned, like the people that just say I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna wing it and like do what I can and then build a team or build a network. I mean, it's really interesting to see how fast that they can grow and become successful. With I'll you know, they're smart, motivated people, so I'll give people that. But it's like when you're going to create innovation or a new business, it doesn't exist anyways. So you can spend all the time you want thinking it out, but it's
Well, I
not
think
really
part of that too is like not knowing is almost better, right? Like, because if somebody told you like you really know what it takes to make a drone, and like, and if I could insert that information into your head and you learned it, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is a dumb idea. I'm never. We do that all the time, like with the stuff we're really smart about. You're like, oh, nobody'd ever pay for that. I'd never pay. Like that's a dumb idea. And the next thing you know, somebody's like made $1 billion off it, like the pool noodle or the chia pets. Those are things that you're like, oh, it's like I totally understand it, but it's the people that like don't know, like, oh, hey, like I'm gonna build a drone. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know the stuff, and I don't know what I got myself into. Like they're the ones that are gonna keep pushing through and get it innovated. Where the over specialized is going to tell you like everything that you can do and why you shouldn't do it. And oh, by the way, the experts in marketing says it's not going to take. And I think that's shown up time and time again in history, where the innovators, they create a product, it becomes a big corporate brand, and then somebody else kind of comes in and goes, hey, like y'all looking at it the wrong way. Let's look at it a different way. And you can't do that. One of the biggest ones right now, whether you love him or hate him, is Elon Musk, just kind of like revolutionizing the space industry and revolutionizing the way electric cars are built. And it's just like, it's just somebody that goes, I'm crazy enough to try it and figure it out along the way. And, like he didn't come up knowing anything about rocket science, and learning as he goes, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have, he goes through and does banking, and then it's cars, and then space and mining. And you're like, I think people like that end up learning a framework for taking action versus building a mental framework for the knowledge itself. So it's like, so there's some kind of meta level of action where he's like, okay, if I want to, and this goes into really a lot of very smart people have a hard time building and managing teams, not just like extended networks, like partnerships or, let's say, like you were saying, a distributor or a manufacturer's rep. Like that's another type of relationship that you have to build and manage, pitch, sell them, manage that. But like just getting a co-founder, people have a hard time doing it because they want to do everything. And then I show them somebody like Elon Musk. I'm like, are you smarter than this guy? I mean, maybe you are, but probably not. And like the first thing that he does is try to attract as many smart people as he can in mass, because you can't run 5, 6, 7 companies and do it all yourself, or you can't. I don't think anyone's ever created a $1 billion company without a team. So
you definitely have to learn how to attract and tell your story so that people want to, and they're inspired by it. Like, hey, you want to come build this project with me that we're never going to get paid, and we don't even know if we'll ever get paid, and we're going to work long hours, and your family's going to never see you, and but we're going to change the world. And oh, by the way, when times are tough and they're hard, and it's nice at this day when we're having a phone call about it, but then it's 3 months down the road when you're stressing because you can't make payroll, and you're wondering what the hell are you doing? Are you still going to get up that next day and do it? Like, those are stories that are hard to sell. But again, if you're crazy enough to be an entrepreneur and crazy enough to figure that out, you got to learn to build personal skills to sell your story and sell that inspiration of doing it, and keeping on going with it. So
yeah, I think that's really cool. Yeah, because it's like maybe even 10 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago, you'd have to go. It's like your analogy of the coffee shop and the going to the golf club, going to the country club, right? If I wanted to start a business, like, I'd have to go to Stanford, or I'd have to like go to Silicon Valley. I'd have to go to one of those innovation centers, and I'd have to like get myself physically involved with people, with the professors, with the students, like with the high growth companies, and I'd have to like get into the mix. But today, like, I have the ability to kind of extend that behavior into even just general interest. Is like, we're both interested in clean tech. We kind of connected on that, and it's like, I wasn't really that focused on clean tech. It's just something that I saw kept popping up, and I have an interest in it, and I started creating content, and it's like, then I started connecting with startups like all over the country, and it's really interesting right now because we can choose that. We can choose our path, and we can connect with people and build that network. Whereas I think back and I look at, even like Tesla, it's like, how do you build a company like that 10 or 15 years ago? Like, how it's so much easier now with tools like social media. But I don't know.
I would add to that, like, because of this mass adoption of being digital. Like, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't take a video call before March, right? If somebody called me on FaceTime on my phone, it was like, don't answer, like, unless it was my wife or my parents. But now it's like, it's very common to do this, and it's allowed us to connect with people that are really into the same interests with you. Like you said, 20 years ago, if you had this niche interest in clean tech, like, you might be lucky enough to meet one other person in your town that had the same interest, right? Or you would have to drive a bunch of miles to go hang out with a bunch of people with the same interest. It's really hard. Now you can go get on Facebook or other places, find groups where people are hanging out, make connections with people, and start like, getting this reach. And you say like, well, I don't got a product, or I don't got this. Why should I do this now? And it's like, well, here's the thing. If you want to go down a path of doing something, you haven't figured it out yet, now's the chance to go make those connections with people. If you go reach out to like, hey, here's a professor at MIT, he's not going to take my call if I'm trying to sell him a product I want him to, take a look at. But if you're just like, hey, I have a general interest in something, can we have a conversation? You're more likely to build these relationships with people, and you never know where they're going to happen, because you might talk to this one person and you kind of talk about what you're interested. Oh, I'll introduce you to somebody else over here. I'll introduce you to somebody else over here. And you're building this relationships up. And then all of a sudden you start working for a startup company, or you've got your own startup company, and you get to a point where you're like, hey, remember how we were really looking for, we're going to need some funding. Well, I remember I made friends with somebody that was actually doing investing, not in our industry, but they were doing investing. And I can reach out to them and tell them, I got something going on. Can they introduce me to some other people that might have interest in it? And those relationships take time. They take a lot of years to build. They take trust. And I always tell people, like, there's two things that nobody can ever take away from you, and that's your network and your experience, right? Those are uniquely yours, no matter who you work for. You leave that company, they go with you. They don't stay behind like your nice computer or your fancy copiers or whatever you're using. Those things go with you, but you can't build them overnight. You can't buy them overnight. Like, you can go buy followers, but you can't buy connections, and start setting that groundwork now, because you're a lot closer connected to people than you really think you are. You know, you go, how do I know, like, the president of the United States? You know, I would never know that president of the United States, but I know somebody that I know knows somebody else that's probably in the president's inner circle, whoever the president might be. You know, like, whenever it is, there's always somebody that you're probably 2 or 3 connections away from getting kind of plugged into that. So just be open to who you meet and say yes, and look to support other people, because when the time comes, you know, it's very beneficial to have a big network of connections.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. And the network, I mean, there's a reason why they call certain types of software, you know, or business models, that they have network effect, right? So people look at it, and we've talked about this before. It's like, oh, I want to sell my stuff, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to try to push it into the market. I'm going to sell stuff. I'm going to make connections with people. I'm going to sell. And I'm like, if you were genuinely interested in that market, and say you started a podcast or you started a blog and you started interviewing, like in clean tech, you'd know, hey, this is how people do door-to-door solar sales, and this is how they split and finance the costs of it. There's tons of opportunities in that side. And then you'd be like, oh, I know, yeah, at Carnegie Mellon, they've got this program where they're working on efficiency of photovoltaics, and like, here's how these products get distributed, and this is what the installers care about. And like, you know, like, you would know a whole lot about it, but you could also, you know, if you're interested, you can have a lot of cool conversations. But yeah, somebody comes into that, or you have an idea, and it's like, now you have pieces from intellectual property all the way to boots on the ground, where you can just put an idea into it. And I don't know, I think people miss the human connection element, and they're like transactionally interested in using, and this is, I mean, not to just hammer on LinkedIn, but I think this is why a lot of people are terrible at LinkedIn, is that they're like, you can go and find out who it has a specific, you know, job moniker, and you can just spam them and say, hey, let me tell you about my CPA services or HR services. I'm like, damn, bro, come on. Like,
Yeah, like, LinkedIn is so powerful right now, in powerful in a good and a bad way. Like, and not like, it in and of itself is indifferent, but the way you use it is powerful. So like, you can powerfully make yourself look really, really bad, and you can powerfully make yourself really, really good. And so, like, what you said here is like, hey, there's automation. I can send out 50,000 emails to like the people that are my target. And if I send out enough, I'm going to get enough yeses, and I'm going to work with somebody. But there's going to be this rub, and really, I don't know. I feel like right now that the circumstances we've gone through this past year and where things are going to go into the future, I think that there's going to be a mass awakening of people going, hey, we're in a people to people business. We're not in business to business anymore. We're not in this, like, just the whole dynamics of like working at a job you hate because it's convenient, to now like having flexibility to do things that allow you to pursue your passions, whether it's creating your own stuff or working remotely for companies that you're inspired to work at. Like, all of a sudden, these constraints of where we were forced to, you know, reside and get our income from are going to drop. And because it's going to drop, people are going to go, I'm not putting up with bullshit anymore. Like, I'm going to deal with people that I resonate with and I trust and like. And so if you go out there and you start using LinkedIn in the same way of that, like, hey, how can I work? How can I help somebody else out? How can I get to know them as a person? How can I support them? You're going to start building this amazing network of people, and they're going to start seeing who you are, and you can use it to showcase your expertise and who you are, what your story has been, and create a personal brand so people know who you are and what you're about. But you're also building relationships and supporting other people to get introductions to, you know, people you may need in the future. And we were kind of I've talked to a few people this year that I've met strictly through like LinkedIn, never met them in person, but we've become friends and we've supported each other's business. And they made a comment that said, you know what, this year has really been amazing because there's people I've known all my life that didn't really do much for me this year in support, but there's people I met 2 days ago that have opened more doors for my business than I've ever had in my life. And it's just, I think you just start getting, when you start looking to support and help other people grow what they're doing, this reciprocity kind of comes back to you, and a bunch of stuff starts opening doors for you. You start able to take decisions. Like, it's back to that journey. Like, if you're showing up and going down the path, the right people are going to come into your life and open the doors for you. And if you keep going down that road long enough, you're going to end up in a place you didn't think was possible, and you're going to be very surprised where it gets you.
Yeah, no, that it makes a lot of sense. It's like, years ago, I read I read about the rise of the knowledge worker. You know, Peter Drucker in his book Management and his other books, he's talking about the rise of the knowledge worker. And one thing that he said that has stuck with me after like reading all whatever, there's so much literature, is that he's looking for the situation that in great businesses, skilled knowledge workers work as volunteers. So he's looking for a situation, great businesses, people work as volunteers because they don't have to work there. They could go out into their network, or their skills are good enough where they could go out in the market. And I think that we saw that, but now we're evolved past the knowledge economy, and now we're into this relationship economy where it's really about people that have stickiness and can make connectiveness to make things happen. But you still have that aspect of working as a volunteer, because now we're at home, so nobody can see like that, you know, you worked 10 hours a day, but you really did it 2 hours a day. But now it's like,
I would expand on that. The rise of the knowledge workers is this idea of like, hey, I'm going to pay somebody 40 hours a week to be in this office and do these tasks, right? And you can't take your knowledge anywhere else. Like, that's the way things have been. And tech has been a little bit different, where it's more like project based. Like, it's okay to go work somewhere for a year to 2 years and then go somewhere else, work for a year to 2 years, where a lot of other industries is still like, what, you've had 12 jobs in 12 years. Like, what's wrong with you? But I think there's going to be a massive shift, and it's going to be more of these project-based roles. It's not like a gig economy, and it's not like a subcontractor economy. It's going to be like, hey, we need to assemble a team to create this project. We're going to create this one thing. It's going to take us 3 to 5 years to do it, and we want to get the best people to do it. And we're paying people for their knowledge, not the hours they work. Like, your experience, there's like this thing here. What was it, the joke where the guy goes, and he fixes a water heater. He like taps on it with a hammer, and then he's like, here's the bill for $1,000. Like, $1,000, you only tapped on it with a hammer. And he's like, yeah, it's $1 to tap on the hammer, and it's $999 to know where to tap, right? Because it's that experience that gets us there. So then if you go, hey, if we're paying for experience, you know, you might be worth a lot more per hour than the hours you actually apply to the project, but it's because you know very specifically what to do. And so people are going to start recruiting. And this is like, goes to like personal brands for business. Let's talk personal brands for employees. I'm a developer. I'm a software engineer. I'm a back-end person. Like, nobody's ever going to see me. When like the new career path evolves, and this is where it's going to go, I think, in the next few years, is people are going to say, okay, the old resume is done. Like, what's the difference between this piece of paper you give me and this piece of paper that I gave you? Like, we're going to look at it and go, I can't tell if you could do the job or not. But if you have a personal brand that's showcasing your expertise and it's very relevant to the project that I need you on, and I said, hey, this project's 3 years long. I don't have a year to train you and figure out if you can do this job or not. I need to know day one that you can come in and do the job and hit it. And so if you have a personal brand, I'm going to see really quickly, okay, you've got experience working on projects similar in size. You've worked with very similar people. You've innovated on your own. You've done things without resources you didn't have before. And I'm going to go, okay, what's the other guy got? A piece of paper with nothing on it?
Yeah.
Even if this guy's better, boom, I'm going to take the person that I think is a known bet.
Yeah, besides the no like trust factor, right? If you've built a brand, somebody could say like, "Hey, I'm trying to build a next level organization and I want to have people that I like." And I think, I don't know you, like you're not my best friend, but I know you more than this piece of paper guy. And I think what you've put out, I think you're going to fit into this high performance culture that we're trying to build. And I think you're going
Yeah,
to,
you're going to have an
be a better
alignment
fit.
of can you do the job, but can you fit into the culture?
Yeah, yeah.
You're attracting those people. There's a company out there right now I'm super, super impressed by. Their name is Gravy, and they're out of Atlanta, Georgia, and they do like
Mhm.
payment recovery. It's not even that exciting of a business, but the company is so exciting because they're building like these brands of personal brands of the people out there selling it, of the recruiting for talent. And like you go on there, and whether you love them or hate them, you're
Mhm.
going to know right away if you're going to be a fit in that company, whether to be an employee or to use their services. So if you're seeing this, you go, they post a job, they have 1,000 applications that day for them because people just want to work there so bad that they have the top talent and they get tons of the thing. We have other people doing traditional recruiting methods with like high paid recruiters and trying to like scour Indeed and Monster.com, whatever those other platforms are, and they can't get even a few people, a handful of people to go apply for the job because like nobody's hearing about it. And then if they do, then they find out like, oh, I'm not even sure if I like this culture. Like you should be promoting all that stuff like right away, and you're going to attract the right people that are going to fit into your company and culture, and take it to the next level.
Yeah, and that's the guy that did the we're going to pay everyone this high minimum, right? We're not going to have any job in our business that we're going to pay people less than some. It was some absurd amount of money, right? And that threw everybody up. Like he's like, we're going to pay the receptionist, $100,000. We're going to pay the janitor $100,000, and they're like, this guy's going to go out of business. But then everybody that aligned with that mission, right, of paying a living wage, of paying people high, people moved from around the country to work there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like people took pay cuts to work there because they agreed, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you
it's
look
cool.
at it, and some people are in a mindset of, I need to accumulate for the skills I do. And other people go, hey, like I'm able to sustain my lifestyle at this, and I will volunteer because I'm the mission is more important than some arbitrary dollars in my bank account. So they're going to
Yeah.
be dropped into it. And what does it do? It filters out the people that don't want to be there. Because if I
Yeah.
know that, hey, I need to get raises and bonuses and accolades every year, I know not to apply there because I'm not going to be happy. But the people that
Yep.
are, okay, I'm the mission, they're going to find that they're attracting their tribe.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like go out and replicate this. I'm saying that came from a personal brand of authenticity for that guy, and it works because that's what he wants to do. And because you see it at all different vectors, but it's just something that you can do with a personal brand being the business brand. And I
Yeah.
thought that was cool.
Well, I
Is
think
it?
that really goes to your branding of your company, which could be core values. It could be like your culture
Mhm.
is showcasing that and be putting it up front and center. And people will know if they're going to fit in or not. And you're going to attract the people that are going to be bought into it. So I think, we talk people as your most valuable asset, and people that are highly engaged and happy at their employment are going to be higher performers. And if they're, you know, resume wise the best, but they're not happy wise, they're not going to be high performers. And so
Yeah,
it's not going to work out good. So it's better to just, put that out there and build this culture and advertise it so that you are attracted to people that are like, hey, this is my mission. I want to be a part of it.
that's awesome. It's so clear when you look at it from that perspective, right? Um, but I know that these conversations, when I'll listen to a podcast or I'll read an article, like it kind of jumps right into the woo-woo side of things, and it becomes this difficult to understand, maintain kind of amorphous conversation. I'm like, guys, just on a super tactical level, like, do you want to work with a bunch of people that you hate or that you don't like, right? Don't you want to work with people that you think are cool? Like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of like what we're saying. It's like you want to work with competent, cool people and that you enjoy. Yeah, that's what we're saying. Okay, you want to make money? that's how you do it. You make more money if you're happy, right?
Mhm.
You're more successful personally or on a business level if you're happy, right? Because if you're unhappy, you're not. It doesn't matter how much money you have.
That's been a huge message of mine this year, is this idea of personal, like the personal face that we put out at home and to friends and family, and then the business side, right? Like we wear two masks, and probably a lot of people came up with the culture like business is business, personal is personal.
Sure.
And that is definitely shifting. Business and personal need to be merged. Why? Because when we're putting on masks to show up at work and different masks at home, like we're not in alignment of who we are, and it's going to manifest itself into things that are unfulfillment, unhappiness.
Yeah.
And then you can say, oh, that's just bullshit, suck it up and do what you're supposed to do. But it's like, you have flexibility now to go work in an environment where you're going to be able to be yourself, business and professionally. Your goals and happiness starts becoming more in alignment. You become more productive, you're more fulfilled. And when you find your fulfillment, I think that just shows up in a lot of other areas. You become more engaged in other areas of your life, and it just overall makes yourself better. Like happiness isn't maybe necessarily a destination. It's a state of being.
Yeah.
That you have highs and lows, but when you're in alignment and you're challenged, like you go, hey, I'm not happy today, but would I rather be somewhere else? And if the answer is no, you're in a bit of an alignment of what your calling should be. And if you're like, I'm miserable, would you rather be somewhere else? Yes, absolutely. Then you should be chasing that, and you should be, attracting that in. So I think there's going to be a definite shift in how people build their employees and build their company cultures and where
Yeah, I
people
agree.
work. It's I don't know if we wanted to get on the weeds on that.
I don't know. I think you could. I mean, it's just like I'm listening to what you're saying, and I think I'm thinking back to like we don't have any in-person networking events now, and I'm like super awkward at networking events, so I started just throwing them and hosting them. Better at that than like trying to make small talk, but it instantly becomes weird because there's a lot of people that are out there, and it's not just transactional behavior, but it's like it's clear that they're pretending to be something that they're not, right?
Mhm.
They're like, yeah, they're an HR consultant, they're a CPA, they're like, they're trying to offer business services, but they're like a weird version of a human being, and I know they're not acting like they really act, and like they know they're not acting like they really act. And I'm like, it's so bizarre, and I hate that kind of business plastic um, thing. I don't even know if that ever worked, but it certainly doesn't work now, and it makes me what you were mentioning makes me think like, yeah, if I had an HR company and that person was on fire for giving people amazing jobs and they were telling people like workplace tips and they were really, really into it, they would probably be pretty natural, at those events, and then probably natural online. But people act so weird. Why are you so weird? And it comes down to it. If you ever get a chance to really talk to them, is they kind of hate their job, or they're definitely unfulfilled for sure. But it's like they're acting weird because they don't they don't have any actual connection with what what they're being forced to do.
That
Yeah.
happens a lot, or they're
Yeah.
doing something that it isn't in alignment with what they thought they'd be doing. Like you just said, like a
Yeah.
CPA. Like I might have gone in to become a CPA because I love crunching numbers and I love accounting. And then you go,
Sure.
well, part of being a CPA is going and doing business development and sales and getting clients, and you hate that stuff. So then you are doing things that aren't in alignment of who you are. And then you go to a place like a networking event and you read some books or saw how you're supposed to act and you're not acting like yourself. And then that's why you're awkward. And that's why I
Yeah.
think personal branding on LinkedIn is amazing, because you can go be yourself. Like you can go showcase who you are. And because it's virtual and because the reach is unlimited, you're going to start attracting people that really vibe with who you are. So like if you're, complete introvert weirdo, but have really unique interests and you're a CPA, you might connect with people that have those really same unique interests that want a CPA. And so having sales conversations is easy because you're like friends.
Yeah. I mean, I have to pick on those people because it's the most stark contrast, because I know CPAs that are just absolutely destroying online. Like they do amazing content, and it's not always exactly what you'd think, right? Um, Same thing with HR people, but the contrast is super, super far. There's a lot of sales content out there, obviously, so everybody is pretty familiar with like the slick, weird salesperson, and then like the like amazing sales content that other people put out. But yeah, it's like you don't have we can really do anything that we want. So
Exactly. Be yourself. If
why don't be weird? Stop being weird.
I think you can be weird. I think you want to be weird. I think you want to like lean into who you are. And I had a post, or I commented on somebody's post about like today about, I think it was today, about being on brand, right? And you talk about like, hey, I got this, like, I'm like, if you go, I'm really a really top-notch CPA. We'll pick on the CPAs again, but I got this like really weird affinity for fitness. And like, you go, well, how can I talk about like fitness that I'm so passionate about, but it has nothing to do with my business? And the question is you talk about it because you're your brand, and that is your unique story. And guess what? That's going to resonate with some people, and you might have another interest in collecting certain types of rocks. And so all of a sudden, like, well, what do rocks, fitness, and CPA have? Nothing, but they're unique to you. And when you're doing you're always on brand. And somebody might be really into rocks and need a CPA. Now they're connected to you. Or they might be really into fitness and need a CPA, and they're, hey, let's do this. Or maybe they're into fitness and rocks and don't need a CPA, but now you got a good friend. So like when you're going to, start vibing with your tribe. I think that's what people like saying these days.
Yeah. I mean, I think we don't really understand like where everything's changed, but it has changed, right? So like maybe at some point next year we'll have a retrospective and say, around summer, like the market shifted like this, and people started reacting more like that. Or hey, in 2020, 2021, building business relationships and networking and human interaction changed to be like this. But right now, we're kind of in the thick of things. We don't
It's
know.
almost like when the internet first came out. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't really remember it like J1, it was here, and the day before it was just kind of like this gradual shift. But then today we look back on it and you go, okay, well, this is when it was invented, this is when it was highly adapted, and then there's like milestones. But like you said, we're in the thick of it right now, and we don't know. But in 10 years, they'll go, well, this is what happened, and this is where like society had a major shift in how like what was acceptable or not, and maybe we're in this revolution because information is so much more available than it used to be, that these massive shifts, like the shift from going to no internet to social media to like what's next, maybe those shifts happen a lot quicker than, it still blows my mind. 200 years ago, you couldn't even fly in an airplane, or less than that time. It's not even that long ago that people were still horse and buggy, cars were invented.
A little over a century ago, most people would not travel 30 miles outside of their own town, right? So now you're experiencing, and this causes all kinds of other psychosis, but like you literally can you can see anything. Like you can go on Instagram and you can see what the most famous person has and what they're doing, and you can see that at scale all around the world. And it is kind of confusing and overwhelming, and can misplace your goals. But you could also, like we're saying, reach out and decide like, hey, I really want to get involved in automation or robotics, or I want to get involved in smart buildings, or something cool. And I'm really trying to advocate people to like design their life and create a big goal, and then say like, hey, here's the things that I'm interested in, like here's my little mission, and like let me get involved in this mission in some way, and see what happens, right? So let's say 5-10 years ago, I was a product development guy, so I was like, hey, let me show you how to develop a product. And now I'm kind of moved into, hey, let's talk about business as a vehicle to achieve what your life, what you want your life to be. But I see all these, like, because we have connectiveness, we see all these giant global problems, right? Like food and by extension ag tech, and we see like automation, we see population and health and all these things, and everybody has like a pet issue that they're into. Like we were talking about clean tech, some people are really into robots, and it seems like the world's so big, I can't get involved in this at all. But in reality, you could just, with a couple clicks, say like, hey, I have a podcast. You want to hop on my podcast and tell me a little bit about industrial automation and manufacturing. What's going on here? And like you can get involved at any level that you want. And I think that's amazing.
That reminds me of something that it's pretty deep, and I don't even know what they call this effect, but it's like taking a grain of sand and putting it on a pile. And when does a grain of sand go from being a grain of sand to a heap of sand, right? Mm-hmm. And so like there's not really a defining one grain of sand, it became a heap, and prior to that it wasn't a heap, but there's definitely, one on its own isn't a heap. So it's like this idea of like, when do you make a difference? And you go, well, how can I make a difference to the world as a whole? I'm just one person. And you say, well, maybe you get on a podcast, and maybe I'm on a podcast and I talk to you, and you get inspired to go talk to somebody else, and that person knows somebody else, invites over, and together you create some idea. And maybe that idea is just basic, and it opens the door for somebody else to add on to it. And before you know it, like, a ton of people have been indirectly influenced to come together and solve some problem that like is massively huge. I mean, like we talked about Elon Musk, those are the way those things happen. And so when you go like, hey, how can I make a difference? I don't know. I think you just do what's right, what feels right, and do the golden rule, right? Treat people how you want to be treated, and pursue the things you're interested in with excitement and passion. And it's going to make a difference, whether you actually are seeing it, the results of it or not. You're having an influence.
That's awesome. I need like a little sound effect button, like like Brad Lee or some of the other podcasters, so I can give a. But yeah, I mean there's just a temptation to make things more overwhelming and complicated than they need to be, and it's just that whole pesky action creates opportunities thing again. But that's awesome. So I'm gonna wrap it up, and appreciate everybody that's tuned in to us live. And but before we go, Nate, what's the best place besides LinkedIn where people can follow you and get involved with everything you're doing?
Absolutely. So thanks again for having me on the show. Had a ton of fun conversing with you about all things life and startups. But yeah, my website is natepeo.com. That's natepeo.com. From there, you can get connected to me on social media. You can find the podcast, and you can find what I'm up to, which is building personal brands on LinkedIn. Can do it for you if you're not sure how to get started. We got something for you that can just really get you kickstarted. If you're looking for something a little bit more specific, we got a strategy that can put you out there and get you going, kind of like accelerate your kickstart to grow on LinkedIn. And then if you're a corporate brand and you said, hey, look, I know we need a spot to be on there, we're just not quite sure how to do it, and we don't really have the time to manage it, I can help you out there, and I can run your LinkedIn marketing strategy for you and help you grow and get connected and open doors where you need help getting doors opened.
That's awesome. Everybody, thank you so much. And look, I don't advertise Goofy products on here. I don't push this out. All I ask is for a slight fee. If you got some value out of this, please share it on your social feeds, share it with a friend. And again, if you have a question that if answered, or an obstacle that if solved would get you to the next level, message me, right? I'll answer it on my solo podcast, or I'll bring on an expert on the End Hype Live. And you can always come in and comment live, and we can answer questions, whatever you have. So I'm doing this to help people get that next level of success. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. My name is Callie Keene. This is End Hype.